They said the St. Clair family didn't have secrets, they had casualties. In the autumn of 1893, Clara Holloway was invisible, a poor relation in a faded grey dress, nursing a cold cup of tea to escape the rain. She was nobody. Until the most terrified woman in London sat opposite her. The Dowager Duchess of Alastair didn't ask for help. She gripped Clara's wrist, her knuckles white, and whispered 5 words that would burn down London society. "Pretend you're my son's fiancée." Clara thought it was a game. She didn't know she was the bait in a trap set for a murderer. This isn't a fairy tale. This is how Clara Holloway survived the Duke of Alastair. The rain in London did not wash the city clean, it merely pressed the soot deeper into the cobblestones. It was October 14, 1893, a Tuesday that smelled of wet wool and horse manure. Clara Holloway sat in the corner of Gunter's tea shop in Berkeley Square, trying to make a single pot of Earl Grey last for 2 hours. At 23, Clara had mastered the art of being unseen. She was the poor cousin, the one invited to dinners only when the table numbers were uneven, the one who wore reworked silk from 3 seasons ago. She was not beautiful in the way the debutantes were. She was too sharp-featured, her eyes a shade of brown that was unsettlingly observant, her hands roughened by the secret needlework she did to pay for her brother's tuition. She lifted the china cup, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. The shop was bustling with the low hum of gossip. To her left, the daughters of the Earl of Cadogan were discussing the upcoming season. To her right, a group of officers were laughing too loudly. Clara was invisible. Until the bell above the door chimed, and silence swept through the room like a sudden draft. A woman had entered. She was tall, draped in black mourning silk despite her husband having died 5 years prior. A heavy violet veil obscured her face, but the posture was unmistakable. It was Beatrice St. Clair, the Dowager Duchess of Alastair. The Iron Duchess, a woman who was rumored to have once slapped the Prince of Wales for a crude joke and gotten away with it. Clara lowered her eyes, expecting the Duchess to be ushered to the private salon in the back. Instead, the rustle of stiff crinoline moved closer. The heavy scent of tuberose and stale gin, an odd, desperate combination, filled Clara's nose. The chair opposite Clara scraped back. Clara looked up, startled. The Dowager Duchess was sitting at her tiny, wobbly table. Through the violet netting, Clara saw eyes that were not imperious, as the papers claimed, but wide with a frantic, animalistic terror. "Don't look at the door," the Duchess hissed. Her voice was a jagged shard of glass. "Your Grace," Clara stammered, setting her cup down. "I believe there has been a mist." "I said, don't look," Beatrice commanded, her gloved hand shooting across the table to grip Clara's wrist. The grip was painful. "There is a man standing by the pastry counter. He is wearing a green cravat. If he sees me alone, I lose everything. Do you understand?" Everything. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She was a Holloway. She was bred to be polite, compliant, and unnoticed. But the fear radiating off the older woman was contagious. "What do you need me to do?" Clara whispered. Smile at me, Beatrice said, her voice trembling. Act as though we are intimate acquaintances. Discussing the wedding. Whose wedding? The Duchess lined in, her breath hitching. Yours. To my son, Clara froze. The Duke of Alastair. Sebastian St. Clair. The man was a myth, a ghost. He was 32, darker than sin, and richer than God. He was also known as the Ice Duke, because he hadn't been seen smiling since 1887. Rumors swirled that he had killed a man in a duel in Paris, or that he was hiding a disfigured face, or that he simply hated humanity. Your Grace, this is absurd, Clara said, trying to pull her hand away. I am Clara Holloway. My father was a vicar. I cannot, he is coming over, Beatrice choked out. Oh God. It's Frederick. He found me. Clara instinctively glanced toward the counter. A man was approaching, slick, handsome in a reptilian way, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He moved with the predatory grace of a man who knows he holds all the cards. Beatrice squeezed Clara's wrist so hard a bruise was forming. Listen to me, girl. Play the part for 5 minutes, and I will pay you £500. £500. That was 5 years of rent. That was the surgery her brother, Thomas, needed for his leg. That was freedom. The man arrived at the table. Beatrice, the man purred. I didn't expect to find you here. And without your security, the dowager stiffened, her spine turning to steel. Frederick. I am not alone. Frederick's eyes, pale and watery, flicked to Clara. He dismissed her instantly. The help, the fiancée, Beatrice said, her voice finding its old imperious strength. This is Miss Clara Holloway. My son's betrothed. Frederick laughed, a dry, cracking sound. Sebastian. Engaged. The man who vowed to let the line die before he let a woman into Alastair House. You'll have to do better than that, Beatrice. Who is she really? A paid companion. He leaned down, his face inches from Clara's. Tell me, darling, how much is she paying you to sit here? Clara looked at the man. She saw the cruelty in his jaw, the arrogance in his posture. And she thought of Thomas, limping in the damp cottage in Sussex. Clara picked up her tea, took a calm sip, and looked Frederick dead in the eye. You are interrupting a private conversation regarding the ducal signet ring, sir, Clara said, her voice cool and steady, mimicking the tone of the high society matrons she had observed for years. Sebastian is quite particular about the setting. He insists the St. Clair sapphire is too ostentatious, but I have a fondness for it. Now, if you would excuse us. The Duchess and I have a dressmaker to visit. The silence that followed was deafening. Frederick blinked. He looked from Clara's steady gaze to Beatrice's rigid posture. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes. If it were a lie, it was a dangerously specific one. The dispute over the St. Clair sapphire was a piece of family law only an insider would know, a detail Beatrice must have let slip to Clara in the past, or perhaps it was true. I see, Frederick said slowly, straightening up. He tipped his hat, though his eyes remained cold. My apologies, Miss Holloway. I look forward to the announcement in the Times. He turned and walked out into the rain. Beatrice let out a breath that sounded like a sob. She slumped back in her chair, the violet veil trembling. You knew about the sapphire, Beatrice whispered. I read the society papers, Your Grace, Clara said, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. You mentioned it in an interview 3 years ago. Beatrice stared at her. For the first time, she really looked at Clara. She saw the intelligence, the steel hidden beneath the grey wool. £500, Beatrice said. I expect a cheque, Clara replied, gathering her reticule. Now, if you will excuse me, I must go. Sit down, Beatrice commanded. The fear was gone, replaced by the calculating coldness of the aristocracy. You cannot go, why not? The man is gone, Frederick is not gone. He is waiting outside. He will check. He will dig. And if he finds out I lied, he will use the information he has to destroy my son. Beatrice leaned forward. The engagement must be real. Or at least, it must look real to the world. For how long until the season ends? 3 months, and the Duke, Clara asked. Does he know he is engaged? Beatrice looked away, her mouth twisting into a bitter line. Sebastian does not speak to me. You will have to convince him, Miss Holloway. You convinced Frederick. Now you must convince the devil himself. Alistair House stood on Park Lane like a fortress of black stone, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. Clara stood before the massive oak doors 2 days later, a letter of introduction in her hand. She had not slept. The £500 had been deposited into her account the next morning, an amount of money that made her dizzy. But the second half of the payment, another £5,000, was contingent on her successfully entering the house and staying there. Beatrice had arranged it all. Clara was to arrive as a guest of the Dowager, claiming she had met Sebastian in passing. Beatrice had warned her, Sebastian hates liars. So tell him the truth, but not the whole truth. Tell him you are there for business. The butler, a man named Henderson, who looked as if he had been carved from granite, opened the door. Miss Holloway, he intoned. His Grace is in the library. He is not expecting you. I know, Clara said, stepping into the cavernous foyer. The house was cold. Not just in temperature, but in spirit. The furniture was covered in dust sheets. There were no flowers, no scent of wax or polish. It smelled of old books and neglect. He gave strict orders not to be disturbed, Henderson warned, though he did not stop her. Clara walked to the double doors at the end of the hall. She knocked. Go away, came a voice. It was deep, resonant, and utterly weary. Clara opened the door and stepped inside. The library was a masterpiece of gloom. Floor to ceiling, bookshelves blocked out the windows. The only light came from a roaring fire, casting long, dancing shadows. Sebastian St. Clair, the Duke of Alastair, stood by the fireplace. He was tall, leaning an arm against the mantelpiece, staring into the flames. He wore no jacket, only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. His hair was black, slightly too long, falling over his forehead. He turned slowly. Clara's breath caught. He was not ugly. He was devastating. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, with a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to soften. But his eyes were the shock. They were a piercing, unnatural blue, burning with a cold intelligence. "I do not recall hiring a maid who is allowed to barge in," he said. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "I am not a maid," Clara said, clutching her purse. "I am Clara Holloway. Holloway," he tested the name like a bad wine. "The name means nothing to me." "Get out, your mother sent me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sebastian turned fully toward her. "My mother," he said softly, "is banned from this house. If she sent you, you are either a spy or a fool." "Which is it?" "I am a business partner," Clara said, stepping further into the room. She needed to be strong. Beatrice had said he respected strength. "She has paid me to be your fiancée." Sebastian stared at her. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "My fiancée," he repeated, wiping a tear from his eye. "That is a new one. Usually, she sends weeping debutantes or distressed widows. Now she is paying commoners to drag me to the altar." "It is not about the altar, Your Grace," Clara said quickly. "It is about Lord Frederick." The laughter stopped instantly. Sebastian moved. He moved so fast Clara didn't have time to flinch. In a second, he was towering over her, his blue eyes blazing. "What did you say?" he snarled. "Lord Frederick Vane," Clara said, holding her ground though her knees shook. "He cornered your mother at Gunter's. He threatened her. She told him I was your fiancée to make him back off. She believes he has something on you." Or her. Sebastian's face went blank. A mask slammed down over his features. He stepped back, pacing toward the window. "Frederick Vane," he muttered. "The rat has crawled out of the sewer." He turned back to Clara, evaluating her cold, clinical precision. "So..." Beatrice panicked. She told a lie. "And now she has hired you to maintain the charade, so Vane doesn't expose. Whatever he thinks he knows." "Yes, and you agreed," he raised an eyebrow. "Why? Are you in love with the title? Do you dream of coronets?" "I need the money," Clara said bluntly. "My brother needs a surgeon. The best in Vienna. Your mother offered me enough to save his life." Sebastian paused. He looked at her tattered gloves, the fraying hem of her grey dress. He saw the desperation, but also the dignity. "Honesty," he murmured. "How refreshing." "A mercenary, then, a necessity, Your Grace." He walked around her, circling her like a wolf. "You have no idea what you are walking into, Miss Holloway. Frederick Vane is not just a blackmailer. He is a monster. If you play this game, you become a target. He will tear your reputation to shreds. He will dig into your past. Do you have secrets, Miss Holloway? None that matter to the peerage, she said. Everyone has secrets, Sebastian countered. He stopped in front of her. If I agree to this, vows, it is not to help my mother. It is to draw Vane out. I have been hunting him for 2 years, Clara blinked. Hunting him? He ruined someone I cared about, Sebastian said, his voice devoid of emotion. If he believes I am happily engaged, he will get careless. He will try to strike. And when he does, I will crush him. He held out his hand. Very well, Miss Holloway. You are hired. Not by my mother. By me. I will double whatever she is paying you. Clara stared at his hand. It was large, capable of violence, yet offering a pact. Double, she squeaked. £10,000. Payable upon the destruction of Lord Frederick Vane. Clara took his hand. His skin was rough, warm, and electric. We have a deal, Your Grace. Sebastian, he corrected. He didn't let go of her hand. He pulled her slightly closer, his blue eyes searching hers. If we are to fool the vultures, you must call me Sebastian. And you must look at me as if you do not despise me. I don't know you, Sebastian. Good, he whispered. Keep it that way. For your own safety. At that moment, the library doors banged open. Zeb. Darling, a voice rang out, shrill and confident. A woman swept in. She was a vision in crimson velvet, with golden hair piled high and diamonds dripping from her ears. She was breathtakingly beautiful and radiated entitlement. It was Lady Genevieve, the daughter of the Marquis of Queensberry. The woman, the papers said Sebastian, was supposed to marry years ago. She stopped, her eyes landing on Clara's hand, still clasped in Sebastian's. Who is this mouse? Genevieve asked, wrinkling her nose. Sebastian didn't flinch. He lifted Clara's hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles while holding Genevieve's gaze. Genevieve, Sebastian said smoothly. Meet the future Duchess of Alastair. Genevieve's face went pale. And, Sebastian added, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, she is staying for dinner. Henderson. Set a place for my betrothed. Clara felt the weight of the room shift. She had entered a war zone. On one side, a vengeful ex-lover. On the other, a mysterious blackmailer. And holding her hand was a man who planned to use her as bait. She squeezed Sebastian's hand back. If she was going to be bait, she was going to be the most dangerous bait London had ever seen. The dining room of Alastair House was a cavern of mahogany and shadows, lit only by 2 candelabras that cast long, flickering shapes against the damask wallpaper. The table was long enough to seat 30, yet it was set for 3. Sebastian sat at the head, looking like a king in exile. Lady Genevieve sat to his right, her crimson dress spilling over the chair like a pool of blood. Clara was seated to his left, feeling entirely too small in her grey wool dress. The silence was not merely quiet, it was a weapon. Footmen moved like ghosts, placing bowls of turtle soup before them. The clink of silver against china sounded like gunshots. So Genevieve began, picking up her spoon with delicate precision. Her eyes, the color of polished jade, flicked over Clara. "Miss Holloway. I must confess, I have never heard of the Holloways of where was it?" "Shropshire, Sussex," Clara corrected, keeping her voice even. "My father was the vicar of St. Jude S." Genevieve paused, the spoon hovering halfway to her mouth. A cruel little smile touched her lips. "A vicar's daughter. How quaint. I suppose that explains the dress. It is very practical. Did you stitch it yourself?" Sebastian's hand tightened around his wine glass, his knuckles whitening. Clara saw the tension in his jaw. He was waiting to see if she would crumble. "I did," Clara said, lifting her chin. She turned to look Genevieve full in the face. "I find that practical skills are necessary when one does not have a retinue of servants to attend to one's basic needs. It builds character. Something the aristocracy often lacks. Wouldn't you agree, Lady Genevieve?" Sebastian choked on his wine. He covered it with a cough, but Clara saw the flash of amusement in his eyes. Genevieve's smile vanished. "Character does not buy diamonds, Miss Holloway. Nor does it secure a dukedom." She turned her attention to Sebastian, her voice dropping to a purr. "Seb, darling, do you remember the summer at Lake Como? When we stayed at the Villa d'Est? You said then that you could never marry a woman who didn't understand the burden of our world. A woman who didn't belong. I remember many things about that summer, Genevieve," Sebastian said, his voice smooth and cold. "Mostly, I remember you leaving it early to marry the Earl of Brighton because he had a larger estate." Genevieve flinched. The air in the room grew heavy. "I made a mistake," she whispered, reaching out to touch Sebastian's arm. "He is dead now, Sebastian. We are both free." "We could. I am engaged," Sebastian said, pulling his arm away. He reached across the table and took Clara's hand again. His grip was firm, grounding. To Clara, Genevieve looked at their joined hands. The jealousy on her face was raw and ugly. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is a farce," she hissed. "Look at her, Sebastian. She is a mouse. She will be eaten alive by the ton. And when she is, I will be there to watch." She stormed out of the room, the heavy doors slamming behind her. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She tried to pull her hand away, but Sebastian held on. "You did well," he said quietly. "She hates me," Clara said, trembling slightly. "She hates everyone who isn't her," Sebastian replied. He finally released her hand and signaled for the footmen to leave. When the doors closed, leaving them alone, his demeanor shifted. The warmth vanished, replaced by the businesslike intensity of the library. "We have work to do," he said. "Genevieve will talk. By tomorrow morning, all of London will know I have chosen a nobody over the daughter of a marquis. They will be looking for cracks in our story. You need to be perfect. I can be perfect, Clara said. But I need to know what I am dealing with. Who is Frederick Vane? Really? Sebastian stood and walked to the sideboard, pouring himself a brandy. Frederick Vane is the illegitimate son of a very powerful man. A man whose name I cannot speak, even here. Vane has made a career of learning secrets. He destroys reputations for sport and profit. 5 years ago, he targeted my younger brother, Arthur. Clara's eyes widened. She had never heard of a brother. Arthur was gentle, Sebastian said, his voice cracking slightly. Vane found out about a debt Arthur owed. He blackmailed him. He pushed him until Arthur saw no other way out. Sebastian took a long drink, staring into the dark liquid. We found Arthur in the stables. A pistol in his hand. Clara covered her mouth. Oh, Sebastian. I am so sorry. I don't want your pity, he snapped, turning to face her. The grief in his eyes was terrifying. I want Vane's head on a platter. He thinks he has something on my mother now. I don't know what it is, and frankly, I don't care about her reputation. But if I can use her fear to lure him out, I will. He will come for you, Clara. He will try to find your weakness. Does he know about your brother? No, Clara said quickly. No one knows about Thomas. Good. Keep it that way. He walked over to her, looming tall and dark. Tomorrow, the dressmakers arrive. You will have a wardrobe befitting a duchess. You will learn to walk, talk, and dance like one of us. And on Friday, at the Walpurgis Ball, we will present you to the world. Are you ready to walk into the lion's den, Miss Halloway? Clara thought of Thomas, waiting for the letter that said the money was coming. She looked up at the broken, dangerous man before her. I am ready, she said. Friday arrived with a storm. Rain lashed against the windows of the carriage as it rattled toward the Savoy Hotel, where the Duchess of Devonshire was hosting the season's opening ball. Inside the carriage, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and nervous anticipation. Clara sat stiffly, afraid to move. She had been transformed. The grey wool was gone. In its place, she wore a gown of emerald green silk, heavy and lustrous. It was cut low across the shoulders, daringly so for a vicar's daughter, exposing the creamy pale skin of her décolletage. Around her neck hung the St. Clair sapphire, a stone the size of a pigeon's egg, surrounded by diamonds that glittered like frozen tears. Her hair had been swept up into an intricate chignon, threaded with pearls. She looked in the small mirror mounted in the carriage. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked regal. She looked dangerous. Sebastian sat opposite her. He wore formal evening dress, the black tailcoat emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders. He had been silent for the entire ride, his eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window. You are trembling, he said without looking at her. I am terrified, Clara admitted. There will be 300 people there. They will all be judging. Me, let them judge, Sebastian said, turning his gaze to her. His eyes lingered on the sapphire at her throat, then moved up to her face. For a second, his expression softened. "You look adequate," Clara couldn't help but smile. "High praise from the Ice Duke. Just remember the rules," he said, his voice dropping low. "Stick to my side. If Vane approaches, squeeze my arm. Do not speak to the press. And for God's sake, do not dance with anyone but me." The carriage lurched to a halt. The footman opened the door, and the roar of the city rushed in. Sebastian stepped out first, ignoring the rain. He offered his hand to Clara. As she stepped down, the flash of a photographer's magnesium powder exploded nearby, blinding her. "The Duke. The Duke is here. Who is the girl? Look at the necklace." "It's the sapphire," the whispers started the moment they entered the ballroom. It was a sea of pastel silks, military uniforms, and diamonds. The orchestra was playing a Strauss waltz, but the music seemed to falter as Sebastian sent. Claire walked in with an unknown woman on his arm. They walked the gauntlet. Clara kept her head high, her hand resting lightly on Sebastian's forearm. She could feel the muscles beneath his coat, tense as a coiled spring. Lady Genevieve was there, standing near the punch bowl, surrounded by a court of sycophants. She watched them with eyes like flint. "Ignore her," Sebastian murmured, leaning down so his lips brushed Clara's ear. To the onlookers, it looked like an intimate whisper between lovers. "Smile, Clara. Tell me a joke." "I don't know any jokes," Clara stammered, her face flushing. "Then tell me what you think of the fat man in the purple sash over there." Clara glanced over. "He looks like a plum pudding that is about to burst." Sebastian let out a genuine laugh, a deep sound that rumbled through his chest. Heads turned. The Duke of Alastair was laughing. The rumor mill went into overdrive. "May I have this dance?" he asked, sweeping her onto the floor before she could answer. The waltz was a blur of motion. Sebastian was a masterful dancer. He held her close, his hand firm on her waist, guiding her through the crush of bodies. For a moment, Clara forgot the plans. She forgot the money. She forgot Frederick Vane. There was only the heat of Sebastian's hand, the scent of sandalwood and rain that clung to him, and the way the world seemed to spin around them. "You are doing well," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "They believe it, do you?" Clara asked breathlessly. Sebastian didn't answer. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back up to her eyes. The air between them crackled with something that wasn't pretend. Suddenly, the music stopped. The crowd parted. A man was walking toward them. He wore a tuxedo that was slightly too shiny, and his smile was a slash of white in a tanned face. Frederick Vane. He stopped 3 feet away, bowing theatrically. "Your Grace," Vane said, his voice oily. "And the lovely Miss Halloway. Or should I say, the future Duchess?" Sebastian's arm tightened around Clara's waist. "Vane. I didn't know they let rats into the Savoy," Vane chuckled. "Always the charmer, Sebastian. I merely came to offer my congratulations. It is quite a match. A duke and a nobody." It is very romantic. Like a penny dreadful, he turned his pale eyes onto Clara. I was just speaking with a friend of mine in Sussex. He mentioned a Thomas Halloway. A cripple, I believe. Sad business. Complications with the bone, they say. Expensive to fix. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. The room spun. He knew. He knew about Thomas. If you ever need a recommendation for a doctor, Vane continued, stepping closer, invading her space, I know some very cheap ones. They don't use anesthesia, but they get the job done. Sebastian moved. It happened so fast that no one saw the punch being thrown. They only heard the sickening crack of fist meeting bone. Frederick Vane flew backward, crashing into a waiter carrying a tray of champagne. Glasses shattered. Women screamed. Vane lay on the floor, blood pouring from his nose. Sebastian stood over him, his chest heaving, his fists clenched. The veneer of the civilized Duke was gone. The predator had surfaced. If you speak his name again, Sebastian snarled, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom, I will not break your nose. I will break your neck. He turned to Clara, who was shaking, her hand clutching the sapphire. We are leaving, he commanded. He grabbed her hand and dragged her out of the ballroom, leaving the wreckage of London society behind them. The ride back to Alastair House was silent, but it was a different kind of silence. It was electric, volatile. Sebastian didn't let go of Clara's hand. He held it so tight it hurt, but she didn't pull away. She was still in shock. He had hit a man. In the middle of the Savoy. For her. For Thomas. When they entered the house, Sebastian dismissed the servants with a wave of his hand. He stormed into the library, pulling Clara with him. He slammed the door and paced the length of the room, running his hands through his hair. I lost control, he muttered. Damn it. I lost control. He got under my skin. He threatened Thomas, Clara said softly. She stood by the fire, shivering despite the heat. How did he know? He knows everything, Sebastian said, turning to her. That is what he does. He finds the thing you love most, and he holds a knife to its throat. He walked over to her, his expression intense. He reached out and touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I will not let him hurt your brother, Clara. I swear it. I will send men to Sussex tonight. Thomas will be moved to a private clinic in Switzerland. Vane will never find him. Clara looked up at him, her heart hammering. Why? Why would you do that? The deal was for money. Not this, because you are under my protection now, Sebastian said fiercely. And because, he trailed off, looking at her lips. He leaned in. Clara's breath hitched. She wanted him to kiss her. God help her, she wanted this dark, broken man to kiss her. But he stopped inches from her mouth. He pulled back, his eyes full of regret. I cannot, he whispered. I am poison, Clara. Everyone I touch gets hurt. Martha. My mother. He turned away abruptly and went to his desk. He unlocked a drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. We need to end this fast, he said, his voice businesslike again, though it sounded strained. Vane made a mistake tonight. He was arrogant. He dropped something when he fell. Clara moved closer. What? Sebastian held up a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt. It fell from his pocket, Sebastian said. It is a receipt for a warehouse in the Docklands. Rented under a false name, but paid for by Vane's shell company. Why would a blackmailer need a warehouse to store evidence, Clara suggested. Or to hide something he doesn't want found. Sebastian's eyes gleamed. I am going there. Tonight, I'm coming with you, Clara said. No, yes, she insisted. He threatened my brother. This is my fight now too. And besides, you can't go alone. You need a lookout. You are the Duke of Alastair. You stick out like a sore thumb. I am invisible. Remember, Sebastian looked at her. He saw the determination in her jaw, the fire in her eyes. She was not the mouse Genevieve thought she was. She was a lioness. Go change, he said. Put on something dark. And for God's sake, leave the sapphire here. 2 hours later, they were in the East End of London. The fog was thick here, yellow and choking. The warehouse stood at the end of a rotting pier, the water of the Thames lapping blackly against the wood. They picked the lock, or rather, Clara did, using a hairpin, a skill she had learned from a mischievous locksmith's son in her village. Sebastian looked at her with grudging respect. Inside, the warehouse was cold and smelled of damp paper. It was filled with crates. Sebastian pried one open. It was full of files. My God, he whispered, holding up a lantern. It's not just me. It's everyone. The Prime Minister. The Prince. Judges. Vane has dirt on. Half of England. Clara was looking through another crate. She pulled out a leather-bound folio. It was old, the leather cracked. It was stamped with the crest of the Alastair family. Sebastian, she called out. Look at this. He came over and took the folio. His hands shook as he opened it. He read the first page, then the second. His face went grey. This is impossible, he choked out. What is it? It's my father's diary, Sebastian said, his voice hollow. From the year I was born. He looked up at Clara, his eyes wide with horror. Vane isn't blackmailing my mother because of an affair, Sebastian whispered. He's blackmailing her because I am not the Duke, Clara froze. What, my father? He couldn't have children. He had the mumps as a child. He writes it here. He knew. Sebastian's voice rose in panic. I am illegitimate. My mother she must have, with someone else to provide an heir. If this came out, Sebastian would lose everything. The title, the house, the fortune. He would be a bastard. A nobody. Just like Clara. That is why Vane is winning, Sebastian realized. He holds my entire life in his hands. Suddenly, the heavy metal door of the warehouse slammed shut behind them. The sound of a heavy bolt sliding into place echoed through the cavernous space. Then the smell of smoke. Clara turned. Smoke was pouring under the door. He knew, Clara screamed. "It's a trap!" Sebastian ran to the door and threw his weight against it. It didn't budge. The fire was spreading fast, eating through the dry paper of the blackmail files. The flames licked up the walls, illuminating the warehouse in a terrifying orange glow. "The window!" Sebastian yelled. He grabbed a crate and hurled it through the high window overlooking the river. Glass shattered, but the window was too high. 10 feet up. "Climb on my shoulders," Sebastian commanded. "I can't leave you. Go," he roared, grabbing her waist and hoisting her up. "Get out and run." Clara scrambled onto his shoulders, reaching for the ledge. She pulled herself up, the glass cutting her hands. She looked back down. The fire was a wall of heat now. Sebastian was coughing, the smoke swallowing him. "Sebastian! Take my hand," she screamed, reaching down. He looked up at her. His blue eyes were calm. "It's too high, Clara," he said. "Jump. Save yourself." "No," he stepped back, away from the wall as the roof groaned above them. A burning beam crashed down between them, separating them with a curtain of fire. "Sebastian, live Clara," his voice came from the flames. "Live for Thomas." Clara watched in horror as the fire consumed the space where he stood. She had no choice. She turned and dove into the dark, freezing waters of the Thames below. As she surfaced, gasping for air, the warehouse exploded, sending a fireball into the night sky. Clara floated in the icy water, watching the world burn. The Duke was dead, and she was the only one who knew the truth. The Thames was not water, it was liquid ice. It filled Clara's nose, her mouth, her lungs, tasting of salt and coal. She flailed in the darkness, the orange glow of the burning warehouse reflecting on the black waves like the eyes of a devil. She remembered screaming his name. She remembered the sound of the explosion, a dull whump that vibrated through her chest, even underwater. Then debris rained down. A piece of burning timber hissed as it hit the water inches from her head. She didn't remember how she got to the shore. She only remembered the mud of the riverbank, thick and stinking, sucking at her legs as she crawled, gasping and retching, onto the stones of Wapping. She lay there for a long time, shivering violently, watching the fire brigade's horses thunder toward the pier. The warehouse was an inferno. No one could have survived it. Sebastian was gone. 3 weeks later, London was shrouded in a morning veil of fog. It was November, and the city seemed to weep with Clara. She sat in the drawing room of Alastair House, wearing black. Not the fashionable mourning of the aristocracy, but a stark, heavy black bombazine that seemed to weigh her down physically. Beatrice, the Dowager Duchess, sat opposite her. The Iron Duchess was broken. She had aged 10 years in 20 days. She held a handkerchief to her mouth, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "They found a signet ring," Beatrice whispered, her voice cracking. "Fused to a metal box." "That is all." Clara stared at the fire. She hadn't cried since the river. She felt hollowed out, as if her insides had been scraped away, leaving only a shell that walked and talked. "Lord Vane has filed a petition with the House of Lords," Beatrice continued, her voice trembling with rage. "He claims the title is vacant. He is backing a distant cousin, a man named Percival St. Clair, a gambler and a drunkard who owes Vane thousands. If Percival takes the title, Vane controls the estate. He controls everything. He killed him," Clara said. Her voice was flat, dead. "He locked us in. He murdered your son, Beatrice. We have no proof." Beatrice slammed her hand on the table, rattling the tea service. "The diary is gone. The blackmail files are gone. Vane has sanitized his tracks. He has been to the police. He claims he was at the opera that night. He has witnesses. Paid witnesses, but witnesses nonetheless." Clara stood up. She walked to the window, looking out at the grey expanse of Park Lane. "Then we must kill him," Clara said. Beatrice gasped. "Clara, I am serious. The law will not touch him. He owns the law. So we must do it ourselves." Clara turned. In the reflection of the glass, she saw a woman she didn't recognize. A woman with eyes like cold iron. "I am not the vicar's daughter anymore. I am the woman who loved a dead man." "You loved him?" Beatrice asked softly. Clara closed her eyes. "Yes. And he died saving me." There was a knock at the door. Henderson, the butler, entered. He looked grey and shaken. "Your Grace," Henderson said to Beatrice, then bowed to Clara. "Miss Holloway, there is a person at the scullery door. A street urchin. He says he has a message for the lady in the green dress." Clara froze. She hadn't worn the green dress since the ball. "Send him away," Beatrice waved a hand. "Wait," Clara said. Her heart gave a painful, lurching thud. "Let him in." The boy was no more than 10, covered in soot, with eyes that had seen too much. He held out a dirty scrap of paper. "Gentleman said to give this to you. Said you'd know the handwriting." Clara snatched the paper. Her hands shook so hard she could barely unfold it. There were only 3 words, scrawled in charcoal, jagged and weak, as if written by a hand in immense pain. "Not the sapphire." Clara let out a cry that sounded like a wounded animal. She fell to her knees, clutching the paper to her chest. "Clara," Beatrice was by her side instantly. "What is it?" "The sapphire," Clara sobbed, laughing and crying at the same time. "At the tea shop, I told Vane that Sebastian and I were arguing about the setting of the sapphire. It was a lie. A specific lie only Sebastian and I knew." She looked up at Beatrice, tears streaming down her face. "He's alive. He was not in a hospital. He was in the devil's armpit." Seven Dials was a rookery, a maze of slums and gin houses where the police feared to tread. The boy led Clara through alleyways that smelled of rotting cabbage and despair. She wore a hooded cloak, clutching a pistol Beatrice had taken from her late husband's desk. They stopped at a crumbling tenement building. The boy pointed to the cellar. "Down there, miss." "Kept him hidden, we did." The doc fixed him up best he could, but he's bad. Clara gave the boy a sovereign, a gold coin that made his eyes bulge, and descended the rotting stairs. The cellar was damp and dark, lit only by a single tallow candle. On a pile of straw and dirty blankets in the corner lay a man. Clara approached slowly. "Sebastian," the figure stirred. He groaned, a sound of agony. She knelt beside him. He was unrecognizable. His left side was heavily bandaged. His face, half of his beautiful, sharp face, was marred by angry, red burns. His hair was singed short. He was gaunt, feverish. He opened his eyes. The blue was still there, that piercing, electric blue, but it was clouded with pain and morphine. "Clara," he rasped. He tried to pull away, turning his face to the wall. "Don't look. God, don't look at me. I am looking," she said fiercely. She reached out and touched the unburned side of his face. His skin was burning hot. "I am looking at the man who saved my life. I am a monster," he whispered. "I should have died in the fire. It would have been cleaner. Vane wins. Let him have it. I am a bastard, Clara. I am nothing. You are Sebastian St. Clair," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "And you are going to get up." "I can't," he choked out. "My leg, the beam." Clara pulled the blanket back. His leg was splintered, badly broken, but the doctor, likely a back alley surgeon, had set it. It would heal, but he would limp. "Listen to me," Clara said, leaning close to his ear. "Vane is trying to install Percival as the Duke. They are holding a hearing at the House of Lords in 3 days. If they declare you dead, Vane wins. He will destroy your mother. He will find Thomas. He will win." Sebastian's eye flashed. The name Thomas sparked something in the ashes of his soul. "He thinks I am dead?" Sebastian asked. "Everyone does." Sebastian let out a low, raspy laugh. It was a terrifying sound. "Good," he whispered. "Ghosts are harder to kill." He grabbed her hand. His grip was weak but desperate. "Get me out of here, Clara. Take me home." The Thames had failed to kill him, but the fire had taken its toll. For 3 days, Alastair House became a fortress of silence. The servants, loyal to the bone, had smuggled the Duke in through the coal chute, hiding him in the master bedroom. He was alive, but he was not the same. Clara sat by his bedside, changing the bandages on his face. The fire had left angry, silver-red burns across the left side of his features, a permanent map of the violence he had endured. "Stop," Sebastian rasped, turning his head away. His voice was a ruin of smoke and pain. "Don't look at me, Clara." I am a monster. Vane has won. Let him have the title. I am nothing but a scarred bastard. You are the man who walked through fire for me, Clara said, her voice trembling but fierce. She forced him to look at her hand gentle on his unburned cheek. Vane is petitioning the House of Lords tomorrow. He claims you are dead. He plans to install your cousin Percival and seize the estate. If he does that, he will destroy your mother. He will hunt down my brother. Sebastian closed his eyes. The name Thomas ignited a spark in the ashes of his soul. I cannot go back, he whispered. Vane has the diary. He knows I am illegitimate. If I walk into that chamber, I have to admit the truths. I will be stripping myself of the title in front of the entire British Empire. Then let them take the title, Clara said, leaning close. We will go to Sussex. We will live in a cottage. But we will not let a murderer win. Sebastian looked at her with a wonder that broke her heart. You would do that. You would give up being a duchess for a cripple in a heartbeat. A dark, dangerous resolve settled over his features. He sat up, wincing as his broken leg shifted. Then, Sebastian growled, let's give them a show they will never forget. The House of Lords, Westminster. The chamber was packed with the stench of beeswax and old money. Lord Frederick Vane stood in the centre, wearing a black armband, feigning grief. My lords, Vane boomed. It is with a heavy heart we must accept the truth. Sebastian St. Clair perished in the fire. He was a troubled man. We must now look to the future heir, Percival St. Clair. I object, the voice rang out from the gallery. The Dowager Duchess Beatrice stood tall, dressed in mourning weeds. My son is not dead. The Dowager is hallucinating with grief, Vane sneered. Remove her. I wouldn't do that. The heavy oak doors swung open with a crash. A figure stood there, leaning heavily on a cane, a long coat collar turned up. The tap-tap drag of his walk echoed in the stunned silence. He stepped into the light and lowered the collar. Gasps filled the room. Sebastian St. Clair was scarred. He looked like a demon who had crawled out of hell. But his eyes were burning with cold, blue fire. Lord Vane, Sebastian said, his voice projecting to the rafters. You seem disappointed. Vane's face went white. This is a trick. He is an impostor. He is illegitimate. I have proof his father disowned him in a diary. The diary exists, Sebastian admitted, silencing the room. My father was sterile. I am not his blood, Vane smiled. He had won. The Duke had just abdicated. However, Sebastian continued, pulling a yellowed parchment from his coat. This is the Royal Charter of Alastair. It states the title passes to heirs of the body or those whom the Duke claims by seal. My father knew the truth. He signed my birth certificate anyway. He claimed me. By the law of this land, I am the Duke of Alastair. He turned to Vane, whose smile had dissolved into terror. But you, Frederick, are a murderer. You burned the warehouse to kill me. And unlike you, I brought receipts. Clara stepped out from the shadows. She held a stack of bank records. "We visited your banks this morning," Clara announced her, voice ringing clear. "We found the payments to the arsonist. We have the payments to the witnesses. It is all here." She slammed the papers onto the Chancellor's desk. "Arrest him," the Chancellor ordered. As the guards dragged a screaming Vane away, Sebastian didn't watch. He turned to Clara. He limped toward her, ignoring the hundreds of staring peers. "Miss Halloway," he said, loud enough for the world to hear, "I find I am in need of a fiancée. A real one. The position comes with a scarred husband and a great deal of scandal. Are you interested?" Clara smiled, tears spilling over. "I believe I have already accepted the position, Your Grace. For £500, I'll make it a lifetime," he said. And right there, on the floor of the House of Lords, the Ice Duke kissed the nobody from Sussex, and the world applauded. 2 years later, 1895, the garden was overgrown with wild roses, far from the smog of London. Thomas Halloway walked across the lawn without a cane, laughing as he chased a golden retriever. The surgery in Vienna had been a success. On the veranda, Clara sat pouring tea. She watched her brother, her heart full. A hand rested on her shoulder. Sebastian stood there. The scars on his face had faded to white lines, giving him a rugged look that Clara adored. "Tea?" she asked. "Only if you are having some," he said, sitting beside her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I never gave you a proper ring." The sapphire was too heavy. Too cold, he opened the box. Inside was a simple band of gold, set with a small, clear diamond. "Marry me again," he whispered. "Here." Where no one is watching, Clara took the ring. She looked at the man who had lost everything to save her, and in doing so, gained the only thing that mattered. "Every day, Sebastian," she said. "I will marry you every day." She poured him another cup. And this time, neither of them was alone. And that is the story of Clara Halloway and the Duke of Alastair. They say love is blind, but in this case, love was the only thing that could see the truth beneath the scars. From a lonely tea shop to the burning docks of London, Clara didn't just pretend to be a duchess, she redefined what nobility meant. If you enjoyed this story of secrets, betrayal, and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a saga. Share this video with a friend who loves a good historical romance twist. What did you think of Sebastian's sacrifice? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep the tea hot and the secret safe.